15 years. Can you imagine searching for a loved one for 15 years? The pain, the not knowing.
It's a nightmare scenario.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. The case of Christy Wilson, a case that haunted Placer County, California for over a decade.
A case that really digs into the idea of justice and closure and what happens when those two things don't quite line up.
Exactly. And if you find these deep dives as fascinating as we do, well, hit that subscribe button and join us as we explore these complex cases. So Christy Wilson, 27 years old, full of life, vanishes from the Thunder Valley Casino, October 5th, 2005.
Just gone.
Gone. And the last time anyone saw her, she was walking into the parking lot with a man named Mario Garcia, a man she met at the casino that night.
Seemingly ordinary encounter. But as we'll see, Mario Garcia was anything but ordinary.
Right. On the surface, average guy, married, family, steady job, hospital project manager.
But that surface, it hides a much darker past.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What did you find in your research about his past?
Well, we have to start with his ex-girlfriend, Wendy Ward. And her story is terrifying. Kidnapped, assaulted, raped by Garcia.
Oh my God.
She manages to escape, and he ultimately pleads guilty to assault with a deadly weapon.
So violence was a pattern for him.
It seems that way, because then there's another woman, Lynette. She dies, tragically, in a car accident, along with her mother.
Oh, wow.
And what's interesting here is Garcia's behavior after the accident. He immediately hires a lawyer for a simple car crash.
Yeah, that's a red flag for sure. Almost like he was trying to hide something.
Exactly. So this pattern of violence and suspicious behavior, well, it makes him a prime suspect in Christy's disappearance.
So investigators zero in on Garcia. What stood out to you about that initial investigation?
Despite extensive searches, nothing. No trace of Christy. Weeks turn into months. Months into years. But investigators keep digging, piecing together a case.
And they find some key evidence, right, in his car.
They do. Christy's hair. In the trunk of his car. Along with tiny drops of her blood on the back seat. At the door.
Wow. And there were also witnesses, right? Putting Christy in his car that night.
There were several, but Garcia, he tries to explain it all away, claims the scratches on his face were from poison oak, a fall from a tree.
But those scratches, didn't his coworkers see them the morning after Christy disappeared?
They did. And an ER doctor who was at the same casino table as him that night testified he didn't see any injuries.
So his alibi was falling apart.
Exactly. And the prosecution builds a strong case. And the emotional testimony of Wendy Ward, detailing Garcia's past violence, well, it becomes a pivotal point in the trial.
It must have been so difficult for her to relive all that trauma. But her courage, it was instrumental in getting justice for Christy.
Absolutely. And after weeks of tense proceedings, the jury finds Mario Garcia guilty of murder.
A hard-fought victory for Christy's family and friends. But this story, it doesn't end there. Because despite the conviction, there was still the haunting question of Christy's whereabouts.
Right. And for her mother, Debbie Boyd, the fight was far from over.
Exactly. But we'll delve into that more in the next part of our deep dive. So Mario Garcia is behind bars, convicted of murder. But Christy, she's still missing.
And for Debbie Boyd, Christy's mother, this is where her strength really shines through. I mean, can you imagine the emotional toll? The fight for justice, only to be left with this agonizing uncertainty.
It's just unimaginable. But Debbie, she never gives up hope. She works tirelessly with investigators, enduring appeal after appeal, relentlessly searching for Christy.
And you know, it wasn't just Debbie. The investigators, Nuno Tavares and Don Murchison, they were equally relentless, so dedicated to finding Christy, bringing closure to this case.
Absolutely. I mean, they explored every avenue, even at one point pumping out a 2,000-gallon septic tank, hoping for some trace of Christy.
A few thousand gallons, that's commitment.
Right. But even after years of searching, nothing. It seemed like Garcia had taken that crucial information to prison with him.
And then this pivotal moment happens. Debbie does this televised interview, and she speaks directly to Garcia, expresses a desire to understand how he became the man he is.
Wow. It's powerful. A mother's plea for answers.
What do you think was going through his mind? I mean, was he surprised by her empathy? Or was he just trying to manipulate the situation?
It's hard to say for sure, but his response, unexpected, he starts writing letters to Debbie and to Placer County officials.
Same way.
Apologizing for her pain. But he continues to deny any involvement in Christy's disappearance.
Remorse without responsibility. Sounds like a classic manipulation tactic.
Yeah. You know, maybe he was trying to gain some sympathy, maybe even negotiate a reduced sentence. But for Debbie, this created a terrible dilemma. Does she negotiate with her daughter's murderer for information, or refuse to give him any leverage?
What a horrible position to be in.
It really is. And ultimately, Debbie decides not to negotiate. She refuses to let him use Christy's body as a bargaining chip.
So what happens next?
This is where the investigators' persistence really pays off. They decide to re-interview Garcia's sons, Chris and Andy.
Okay. And what comes out of these interviews? Well, Chris, the eldest son, remembers the seemingly insignificant detail. From the days following Christy's disappearance, he saw his father frantically working on their property with a tractor.
It doesn't sound too incriminating at first. I mean, people work on their properties all the time.
Right. But it's the timing and the frantic nature of the work. And Mario, unusually, refused to attend Chris's soccer game that day.
So these inconsistencies lead investigators back to the Garcia property.
Exactly. But remember, they had already searched it extensively, even used cadaver dogs. So this time, they bring in new technology, ground-penetrating radar.
So this is where technology starts to play a bigger role in the investigation.
Huge role. Ground-penetrating radar. It sends these electromagnetic pulses into the ground, and they reflect back when they encounter changes, like a buried object.
So you can see beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Without digging up the whole area.
Exactly. And in this case, the radar scan identifies 8 suspicious spots on the property.
8, so they start digging.
Yep. First 2 holes, nothing. But on the 3rd hole, they hit something.
What was it?
A bone. But they needed to be sure. They bring in an archaeologist who confirms it's human.
After all those years, that must have been an incredible moment. But was it enough to confirm they'd found Christy?
It was a start. They keep digging. And soon, more remains. As they carefully piece it all together, this horrifying but undeniable truth starts to emerge.
They had found Christy.
They had bittersweet victory, relief, confirmation, but also the crushing weight of her tragic end. So many emotions, especially for Debbie.
And the investigators, they flew to her home to deliver the news in person.
They did, remembering her request to be notified personally. Really sensitive gesture, recognizing the impact of this discovery.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Christy Wilson case. It's been a long road, lots of twists and turns, seeing the dark side of humanity, but also the strength of the human spirit. And we left off with the discovery of Christy's remains on Mario Garcia's property. After 15 years, Debbie finally had an answer.
It must have been overwhelming. The relief, mixed with the realization that her daughter was really gone.
Such a mix of emotions. But it did open the door for healing and closure. So, did they learn anything more from her remains about what happened to Christy?
Well, the autopsy, it couldn't determine an exact cause of death because of the condition of the remains, but her hand and nose were broken, which suggests a violent end.
It's awful. But amidst all this tragedy, there's this sense of justice. Because finding Christy's remains, well, it solidified Garcia's guilt. No room for doubt.
Absolutely. No more lingering questions. And for Christy's loved ones, it brought a sense of peace, knowing she wasn't lost anymore.
Garcia was already serving a life sentence. Did this discovery change anything legally? Or was it more about closure for her family?
It was really about closure. His legal situation didn't change. He's still in prison, still refusing to admit guilt or tell anyone what happened that night. But for Christy's family, it was monumental. They could finally lay her to rest and begin to heal.
It's a bittersweet ending to such a tragic story, but it really shows the power of perseverance. Debbie never gave up, and investigators Tavares and Murchison, they never gave up on this case.
It's inspiring. They could have closed the case after the conviction, but they knew finding Christy. It was about more than just solving the crime. It was about restoring her dignity, bringing closure to a grieving family, honoring her memory.
It's a powerful reminder that hope and determination can prevail, even when facing unimaginable loss. This case has certainly stayed with me. What would you say is the biggest takeaway from this deep dive?
That even in the darkest times, the human spirit can endure. Debbie's unwavering search for her daughter, the investigators' relentless pursuit of the truth, it shows the good in humanity, hope, and resilience.
Well said. And to our listeners, if you've been touched by Christy's story, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How do we balance justice with the desire for closure, especially when the perpetrator won't cooperate? It's a tough question. No easy answers. But maybe, by talking about it, we can honor the victims and support those left behind. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful explorations. Until next time.